Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate, and this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. Laura and I love book clubs so much, we built a whole show around it. It will come as no surprise to our listeners to learn that our favourite magazine also takes the form of a book club. For a number of years, Penguin Books have quietly been producing The Happy Reader, their collaboration with the team behind glossy magazines Fantastic Man and The Gentlewoman. Each issue focuses on a book of the season selected from the Penguin Classics range. In the early days of the podcast, we used to have a book club discussion and an interview all within the same show. As a result, we realised listeners who've come to the pod more recently might not have heard one of our favourite interviews with the Happy Reader's editor, Seb Amina. As a new edition of the magazine has just been launched, it seemed a perfect time to bring this one out of the archives. If you haven't heard it before, Seb is a reader who always inspires us to think more carefully about what we're reading. Listen in to hear his favourites from all the books they've covered in the magazine, plus he has some pretty interesting ideas for book club meetups. And if you have, why not listen again? Much like The Happy Reader, it's a gem. The exact concept of the magazine is a little bit difficult to pin down, so I began by asking Seb to explain.
What is The Happy Reader? We describe it a lot of the time as a magazine-shaped book club. The format of the reading group has become really interesting in terms of you've got people like Florence from Florence and the Machine, Emma Watson. They're all doing versions of book clubs using different platforms. Mark Zuckerberg did one for a year using Facebook. So I guess The Happy Reader is a book club that takes the platform of a magazine for its own and sees what can happen when you use it that way. Maybe not the format of a book club so much because it's very much a readable, linear magazine in many ways, but the spirit of a book club. It's a collaboration between Penguin, and specifically Penguin Classics, and the people behind magazines like Fantastic Man, The Gentlewoman, those kinds of things. So it's a collaboration between some of the best book designers in the world, I think, Penguin Press, and some of the best magazine designers and magazine makers. It's a magazine of two halves. Every issue has a cover star, a significant cultural figure who is also a voracious reader and avid consumer of the written word. We interview them at length about their reading habits, and through that you can kind of get at everything about a person, I think. And then the second half of the magazine, it really is very, very conceptual in the sense that if you open the 64-page magazine, on the staple in the centre, you find a second cover, and the cover star of that half of the magazine is a book, which we call the book of the season. Every issue we choose one single classic work of literature, and half of the magazine is inspired by or in the orbit of this book, which is to say it's not about the book so much as almost as if the book was to come to life and become the guest editor of a magazine of some kind. So it could be everything from reportage to opinion to essays about elements of history. It could be an interview with somebody else. We've had interviews with Corsican separatists and with pop stars. But every single time there's some kind of link, tenuous or direct, with the book of the season. If you have read the book, then brilliant, you'll understand this strange jigsaw puzzle that we're putting together of magazine articles that use the book as their kind of centre of gravity. But if you haven't read the book, you can still enjoy the magazine. So in that sense, it's a bit like a real book club where you can go along and have a drink and enjoy the conversation, even if you've been pretty naughty and haven't actually got around to reading it. And then also at the end of the magazine, we reveal what the next book of the season will be. So the idea is that everybody's reading along.
Off the top of your head, can you go through some of the books that you've covered in The Happy Reader over the years?
The first one we did was the classic Gothic thriller from the late 19th century by Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White, a real page-turner, so a perfect book for people to get started with The Happy Reader on. There's The Book of Tea by Kakuzo Okakura, which is a sort of meditation and a treatise on the Japanese tea ceremony, but on the kind of quotidian beauty of everyday rituals in general. We had Granite Island by Dorothy Carrington from 1971, an incredible portrait of the island of Corsica. We had Émile Zola's Au Bonheur des Dames about the rise of the Parisian department store. And we had Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, probably needs no introduction.
The celebrity interviews, it's a very interesting way of finding out about someone. I'm always struck by the number of recommendations that come out of that, just because in the course of that conversation, often the subject will bring up books that they've really loved, but also the interviewer will as well, and you come away sort of fizzing with ideas for things you might want to try. Have you made any discoveries through those interviews or through editing the magazine in general?
Every issue, the cover star recommends so many books that sound really great. The trouble is finding the time to look at all of them. I'm still discovering things from the first issue that I finally got around to reading, one of which was Annie Dillard, Teaching a Stone to Talk, and I'd never read any of her stuff before. That collection of essays, the word essay almost is insufficient to kind of capture what they are, but there's so many amazing, vivid pieces in that book, and I probably never would have picked it up if it hadn't been for Dan Stevens talking about it.
It's beautifully produced, it's absolutely beautifully designed, and each one comes with a bookmark, and it's full of gorgeous photography, and it's very beautifully typeset. Is there a sense in a world where so much is disposable and online that it's important to have something that is for people to cherish and keep and to be able to page through?
It's an interesting question because I think also the design, it feels quite flimsy in a way. We don't have a glossy cover and the paper stock. It's beautiful, but it's designed to feel like you can read it, that you don't have to put it on your coffee table and forget about it. We had an amazing letter from somebody, he lives in Seattle, and he said he was in one of those second-hand shops, like leafing through a pile of like worn-out copies of Auto Trader or National Geographic, and there was this odd, dog-eared, coffee-stained magazine that he assumed to be from the 70s or something. And then he realised that the cover star was Grimes, who's an incredibly contemporary art pop musician, and he bought it and was totally taken by the magazine. I love these kinds of things. It makes me so excited to imagine people around the world just finding the Happy Reader in these old piles of whatever. And he got quite lucky because every single issue of the 8 before the current one has completely sold out and is almost impossible to find now. I mean, some of them are going online for £300 or £400.
I realised this myself because I was looking for my old issues, because I remember I bought the first Happy Reader when it came out. And then with great pleasure, I subscribed, thinking, oh, fantastic, I'll be able to get this. And so theoretically, I have all of them. But I've been very casual about them. I can remember a couple I just gave away to friends, saying, oh, you're going to love this, you should have it. And then when I looked online, idly thinking, oh, maybe I can restock, I saw, sure enough, they've all gone. And I thought, oh, damn, I think I should have treated these as more precious than I did.
I mean, in answer to your question, I think we're kind of between the two. We do really want people to read the magazine. But yes, it is so wonderfully designed between Job van Bennekom, the art director of Fantastic Man, and the team at Penguin Press, Tom Etherington and Matt Young. You've got such an elite team of designers working on it, and we really do concentrate on how it looks to the utmost degree in each issue. For Treasure Island, actually, we were kind of talking about Treasure Island, what we could put in the magazine, and I got really excited about the idea of actually burying something, actually having a treasure map in the issue. It's really just a kind of mind-blowing idea for a magazine to break out of its pages and put something in the real world. And then it was a weird conversation because we were like, well, what should the treasure be? I mean, we don't have budget to like buy some gold coins or something. But we realised, of course, a complete set of Happy Reader back issues is actually quite a scarce commodity. So then we had this whole conversation, well, how do we bury it? And it became legally quite difficult. You know, you can't just go into a park with a spade and a chest and bury something because it's owned by the council or it's owned by the National Trust or private landowner. And then the second you ask them the question, they're trying to think of why to say no to you. So it was actually quite a logistical challenge. In the end, I found an agent of sorts in Margate. I can tell you this because, as chance would have it, the treasure was finally found 7 weeks after publication. On Saturday, I got an email with the code phrase 10 fathoms south of the Black Crag, which announced to me that somebody had finally discovered this treasure. It was an old tobacco tin full of nautical knickknacks, taped to the back of a street sign outside a bookshop called the Old Bank in Margate, which contained the instructions to order your full Happy Reader hoard, which is the back issues plus every single past book of the season. So there's 10 books that you can read. These two guys took a day trip once they'd realised that the island question on the map, because it was a trick of scale, so the island was not a little Treasure Island style island. It was actually the Isle of Thanet, which is the bit of Kent where Margate and Deal and places like that are.
That's fantastic. If you were to recommend just one of the books that the Happy Reader has covered over the years to people to read, which would be your top pick?
You know, it's a really difficult question. Kakuzo Okakura is the Book of Tea. I love that book because it's a very easy book to read. It's 7 chapters. You can read it in a week. I suggested you should read it with a cup of tea each day and read 1 chapter. It's very funny. It's very profound. People I've lent it to have said, this is the best book I've ever read. They've phoned me from their sofa to tell me how much they like it. I've always had a bit of a thing for the everyday, for finding meaning in the mundane, in the things that you'd normally overlook. And for me, that book, I keep coming back to it, and I've kept writing about it in other places as well. So yeah, I think with We, which all of your listeners should read and talk about in their own book clubs, it's such an amazingly poignant book for the time, I think, both in terms of being Russian. It was the first book to be banned by the Soviet Union, and obviously we're all talking about Russia right now for various reasons. And then it has this sort of dystopian utopia at its heart. And I think that all ties in really fascinatingly with what's happening with Silicon Valley and the sort of tech libertarian movement and what they're all obsessed with. So somehow it's at the cross-section of geopolitics and whatever our culture is doing with technology and whatever the future holds.
And Seb, are you in a book club?
Not right now. Well, apart from the Happy Reader, which to me is like a constant, permanent book club. But years ago I was in a book club based in London. I mean, I live in Paris now, but this is like 10 years ago probably. And it was two friends of mine. They set up a book club where each of them was allowed to invite one other person to be in the book club. And that person had to be a stranger to the other one. And then each of those people could then invite one other person. And so on until we had 10 people in the book club. So it was a kind of a string of loose acquaintances. So it was quite an interesting format, basically. I really loved it. It's a strange thing to say maybe to a book club podcast, but part of my favourite part, and maybe everyone feels like this, was the moment when you stop talking about the book and you just start talking about everything. It was kind of a social club as well. Years later, I was reading this blog post by an artist called James Bridle, and he came up with an idea called the Invisible Book Club. It would be a book club where everybody reads the book and you go out for a drink or you go out for lunch or whatever it is that you do, but you're not allowed to talk about the book. It's just that knowledge that everyone has the ideas and images and atmosphere of the book rattling around in there somewhere, somehow tinges the meeting. Something of the Invisible Book Club concept perhaps has inspired the Happy Reader, because some of these articles you're like, what the hell has this got to do with the novel I just read? But then when you think about it, you understand, you see that it's just a sentence somewhere in the middle of this 500-page novel that spirals and snowballs and becomes a whole article. And I think that's a really beautiful idea. It's what means that anyone can read it, whether or not they've read the book of the season.
The Invisible Book Club. How could you bear it? How could you possibly read the same book as everyone and then not discuss the book?
I thought that was quite funny. You know, for me, I enjoy just, you know, the chit-chat with everyone, but really I mainly like it when we talk about the book.
And I love the book. I love both elements, absolutely. It's from the book discussion that we then can launch off into so many other topics. But the idea of sitting down with people who've read something the same as me and not talking about it is baffling. Anything I read, I'm desperate to talk about it.
Well, I think the artist you mentioned, I'm not sure he actually ever executed this, it was just an idea.
Oh, okay.
But it ties into, actually, you know, the Happy Reader as a publication. It's a lot more conceptual than you might realise from all these tiny details, like this carefully considered aspect of the design where it falls open exactly at the halfway point and you have the end of the first section and the beginning of the second. You know, you'd never notice that, but actually it's something that they've thought really carefully about. And then the way that he's tying in these articles that he's commissioning, linking them into a little fragment detail of something that you might have read in the book, but that will kind of, would please you.
It reminds me that actually a lot of book clubs do research around the books they read. You know, someone will be nominated to do research and bring it and report back. My book club doesn't do that, but no, neither does yours. But there is something about that, because then you get these little tidbits. And I know in probably both our book clubs, there's always someone who knows a lot. And there's a moment where you kind of turn to them and you're
That's
like, and what do you know about
very
this
much
historical moment?
And if she's listening, she knows who she is. But, you know, very much I rely on the fact that I know that there is going to be a person who knows some facts and that, you know, she will deliver them. That'll be great. So, perhaps that's why I'm a bit lazy. What really inspired me talking to Seb, and it's also what I get when I read The Happy Reader, is that sense that actually it can be so rewarding just to think a little bit more carefully about what you're reading and to dig into things a little bit more. I tend to just sort of read things and enjoy them or not, but then move on. You know, that's the pleasure for me, it's the next thing. And I love that this almost asks you to just slow down and consider and spend more time with that book than you might otherwise have done, and that could be incredibly life enhancing and rewarding.
And also that you're in good company with the cool kids of the world, like Lily Cole, the supermodel, Kristen Scott Thomas, Ethan Hawke, Alan Cumming.
Yeah.
I love Alan Cumming. It's beautiful. It's a really gorgeous object, and I'm definitely going to start picking them up.
Well, or subscribe. I can't recommend it. It costs, I think it costs £6 a year or something. And it's the one thing that comes through the post where when I see that envelope in the letterbox, it's just the purest pleasure. I know this lovely thing is waiting for me, and it's just a joy. And yeah, as I say, I wish very much that I'd been more careful about keeping hold of my copies. There is actually a friend in Paris who I gave one to, and I did actually ask her for it. I said, "Do you really care about that thing I gave you? Because if you're not rereading it regularly, could I have it back?" Which is monstrous, but
Did she let you have it?
It's sort of that's sort of the point I've got to where I value them now so much.
Did she give it back to you?
Not yet.
Oh, hopefully she's not listening.
That's almost it for this episode. You can find out more about The Happy Reader, buy the latest issue, or subscribe at their website, thehappyreader.com. If it sounds like your thing, you can also sign up to their newsletter, Happy Readings, where once a month you'll get a little dose of happy readerness in your inbox. You can also find Seb on Instagram and Twitter at SebAmina, that's SEBEMINA. Go and check him out and find out how to make the perfect boiled egg with the help of Kate Bush. Out next weekend is our 2021 Women's Prize podcast. We've read every book on the shortlist and invited 2 previous podcast guests, Sarah Oliver and Elizabeth Morris, back on the show to discuss them with us. Did we love them? Did we loathe them? Which one do we think should win? And which do we think would make for the best book club reads? Listen in to find out. If you'd like to see what we're up to between episodes, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Book Club Review Podcast, on Twitter at Book Club RVW Pod, or email thebookclubreview@gmail.com. Don't miss our website, thebookclubreview.co.uk, where you can find our archive of nearly 100 shows to browse through and sign up for our weekly newsletter. It comes out on Sundays, and it's full of reading inspiration for your week ahead. And if you're not already, why not subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode? If you like what we do and want to support us, please do take a moment to rate and review the show, which helps new listeners find us. But for now, that's our show. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.